and all things or some things. We couldn't possibly cover all things in the pay-to-play market, but we are going to talk about transparency in advertising and things of related nature today. And I'm so excited to introduce to you Gordon Firemark of the Podcast Lawyer, and Elsie Escobar of Libsyn and She Podcasts and elsieescobar.com, all things elsieescobar.com. And I am Trevor of Numospect. Welcome to Numospect. Here is our intro by Bree Campana, who is awesome. I love intro music, even if it's a little silly, like it gets me dancing, especially like with the nerve a little bit. I'm all about it.
Oh my, my. Oh my.
Happy Friday, Elsie. Happy Friday, Gordon. I want to start with a softball. In addition to how are you doing, tell us where you spent the most time in your content dive on this week's topic of transparency. I spent extra time in podcasting, but I'm curious where you all spent your time as you kind of navigated around this topic this week. Elsie, we'll start with you.
On the creator side, and I think that one of the things that keeps coming up when I come here and get behind the mic is that my goal is to voice the everyday. I call usually the everyday podcaster is a term that I've been using for so long. The everyday content creator, so not necessarily big folks, like big as in like fancy and have all the people, but the those of us that are getting our hands dirty every day and where we stand, which is usually not where that top 1% stands. So that's where I focused a majority of my intention on this topic.
Beautiful.
Well, I feel like I've been bathing in the goodness or badness that is the Federal Trade Commission, and what they've been saying about influencers and advertising and transparency and those kinds of things. It just happens that this week also coincided with my teaching my classes on the same subject, so it's really been an intensive with me this week.
That's true, and that was the topic of the last couple-ish weeks of your own show too. Is that right?
Well, that's me maybe applying a little leverage to things and trying to, if I'm preparing for one thing, I'll prepare for another. Not to repurpose content completely, but definitely, it's also on everybody's mind right now with AI and with the other stuff we've been talking about on this show. This stuff is really bubbling to the surface everywhere I go, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair to both of you, you're leading the conversation. I mean, I have felt it bleed over into our conversations on our own live show, but that being Bree and I, because we just want to talk about it more. We get into it as a group, the four of us in like pre-pro, whether that's on Monday or Tuesday or Thursday, it doesn't seem to matter. Like my mind has spent an equal amount of time just obsessing over this topic since we spoke yesterday. And I stumbled into some really cool podcast episodes that were done by like universities and things of that nature, which I'll drop in the notes afterwards. But super, super cool stuff out there in terms of people starting to talk about this. But I will tell you, there is a deficit of podcast names with the word disclosure or transparency in them. You'll be surprised to know. So if you're looking for a new podcast name that's got a little SEO hit, there's not a ton out there. But I did kind of want to start there because it did blow my mind. And this is not one that's on there, but do you all have a quick or a brief or anything to say on any podcast that you follow that you think set a good example in this arena? Because that's where kind of my head is walking in, and I want to give people an immediate resource to turn to if they can't stick around for the whole thing today to make sure they can get on and learn a little bit more. Do you have a resource where you go, whether I guess that's podcasting or otherwise? Elsie, I guess, again, I'll flip it over to you first.
You mean a resource for disclosures as a whole, or somebody that's doing it well in podcasting?
Yeah, somebody who in a way where if they said it, you would feel comfortable, or they're talking about it maybe more frequently than other ones.
This is no, I don't have a resource.
Okay, cool.
I just do all my reading, in terms of, I think if I were to say to somebody, get a reader app, of some kind. Feedly is a great one online.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I use on on iOS and iPad is Reader, Reeder. There are plenty more than that actually. So but Feedly is what I've been using for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I would say subscribe to like TechCrunch or Mashable or The Verge. All of those are great places for you to get like the whatever the what's happening in there, Engadget, all of those things. Subscribe to them. Periodically open it up, scroll through all the stuff, look at the headlines, see if something's coming up in terms of disclosure. Boom.
Yeah.
If you are using something like Reader, you can actually search for it. So you can look inside of the Reader op. Again, it's Reeder. And let's say you're looking for, there's disclosure, and just put that in the search app. And then you'll see any of the latest and greatest articles that have been published about said thing that you're subscribed to. So it doesn't like search the entire internet. But once I have those in there, it's really easy for me to stay up to date on anything that's being put out there, whatever topic you want, actually.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I use Feedly on my tablet and phone as well, and I find that it's really good at breaking. You can get it in categories. So podcast law stuff. My other show, Entertainment Law Update, I have feeds set up for lots of different feeds that I sort of survey, and it takes me maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day to scan all those headlines and identify the stories that I want to read, and it's part of our workflow for creating that other show as well, because the rest of the team is also on it and we bookmark things. I've got several hundred different blogs that I follow on various subjects, and then the searchability is great. And on the paid version of Feedly, you can actually set up programmed searches, and it'll highlight kind of like a Google. What do they call those Google search? The program
alerts.
Yeah.
Google alerts. Yeah.
Yep.
So it'll say, "Hey, so and so wrote a blog post about this," and you can check it out. And I find that that's pretty good. But on this disclosure side, no, there isn't. I don't have any ideal resources. I think you nailed it, Elsie, with mentioning The Verge and TechCrunch and those blogs. Although I do think that, again, even those guys, disclosure and transparency is a little bit of an issue sometimes. I mean, Mike Masnick at TechCrunch has a very distinct point of view about things, and until you get to recognizing what that is, you're going to read his stuff, and it's really what we should be teaching kids from a young age is you got to look at where it's coming from, and the perspective that comes from the angle that someone comes at things with. So
yeah, that brings up kind of where we're headed first today, which is influencer disclosures. And I guess you could take off influencers and replace that with a lot of different words. And maybe that's a good place to start to draw a little bit of structure around this. Is when we talk about disclosures, I guess who does it impact the most, the two sides? Because in my head, it's maybe oversimplified from like a logistical or a legal standpoint. I think of disclosures as most important for the consumer to know kind of what they're getting, right? And also for me as a brand, depending on what and this is where ethics comes in, right? But depending on what your ethical code is, that seems like the biggest driver of disclosures, not necessarily that they're required or that they're checked up on. But maybe that's a good place to start. Who does this impact the most? Because I think of business and I think consumer, but that's a pretty simplified look on it probably, right, Gordon?
Well, it's simplified, but it's not inaccurate. The consumer protection is the driver, I think, for a lot of this, and whether that's from a legal regulatory structure that's in place, and there is one, it's pretty powerful, but whether it's from that regulatory point of view or the ethical moral thing, you just have to ask yourself this question: if I as a consumer would want to know before making a purchasing decision, or even just a decision of where to put my attention, then I think it's incumbent on us to disclose that information so that our audiences have all that, that perspective that I was talking about. From a legal standpoint, the as I mentioned earlier, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is the body that regulates advertising and fair trade practices. And It has, a handful of regulations, not just about truth in advertising, but transparency in advertising and marketing. And, when it comes to influencers, when it comes to affiliate transactions, the rules are pretty clear. You have to make these disclosures, or the brand, actually, the company that's product is being advertised. Whenever there's a financial or economic relationship between the publisher of the content, that's you and me, and the brand that we're talking about, if we're promoting a particular product, if we're getting paid, if we're getting free goods, if we're getting some kind of promotional exchange of value, we're supposed to tell our audiences. And it's sort of common sense, but what's troubling is that it's not very common to see people exercising common sense.
Yeah, I think our leaders don't always set a good example. I mean, I don't want to wade into politics necessarily, but that was a place I thought of, is with super PACs and things of that nature that protect information like that for some of our more influential leaders. Elsie, any take on how it impacts influencers and where you see it impacting like podcasters the most and the people that you're around? Is this a common topic with them?
It's not really a common topic because we don't really think about it because the disclosures are not there, if that makes sense. I think that it is something that I wrestle with a lot because a lot of time, whenever someone has a lot of influence in whatever market, but we're going to stick to maybe podcasting since that's what I do most of the time. Whenever somebody has and they influence in so many different ways. Either they have a really huge community, or they have one of the most well-known how to podcast educational series or something like that. This is something that we have to think about too. Whenever you see those reviews, right? Like top 10 microphones to use for podcasting, right? You often see those all the time. What you don't know is that a lot of those are pay to play. So there's something that's happening where they're getting some kind of financial incentive to have those microphones be the ones that are there. And most people, especially when folks are making money off of websites and SEO and juice, right? They're really optimizing on those search results for what people, let's say, I'm just sticking to podcasting, but this happens in every single place, right? You never know if the top 10 list is really a top 10 list of the best podcasting microphones, or if it's just the top 10 list of affiliate, relationships that they have, and that maybe it's the top 10 microphones that are paying them out that much. Those things, you don't know.
Yeah. Or just the top 10 who sent me free stuff.
Exactly. Or possibly that. I would say that most of the time with those top 10 there, I venture to say that a lot of the time those are skewing slightly less to providing free stuff versus affiliate stuff. Like, so there are links.
Oh yeah, follow my link and I'll get paid. And
yes.
Really, that's all the disclosure has to be.
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen really small, like I just saw, what I saw? I was just looking at, oh my gosh, it was actually a really, really well done, helpful article on the pros and cons of getting the Apple credit card. Because it's a very specific type of credit card. You get all kinds of really little perks that come with using the credit card. And it was a very thorough, incredibly helpful. I felt it was not a swayed kind of point of view. And as I scrolled all the way down, at the bottom, it said they had a disclosure link because they were essentially pointing to a service that does this kind of breakdown for you, meaning they look at credit cards and then they give you the pros and cons of all the credit cards. And it's like a thing you subscribe to, that kind of stuff. But it was at the bottom. And after I read all that, I wanted to use that service because I thought, wow, this was even though I don't think it was written by the people that wrote that thing, I believe it was on Mac It was in a Mac. It was on a very well-known Mac website. So it wasn't, but the disclosure was there. The link was there, but the article was incredibly good. And I found it very, very helpful. So that's simple. Like, that's it, right? Yeah. I could now make a decision and not be assuaged. But a lot of the time, though, those other ones don't do that.
The blogging community has been aware of this need and more on top of it, not entirely, but more on top of it in a lot of ways for a longer time. But podcasting and YouTube, we're not seeing nearly as much just awareness on the creators' end, I think, of the obligation and what they should do. And you know, they're not thinking about it as something, oh, you know, hey, I'm going to tell you which I really like. And sometimes you got it for free, or you see that, you know, it's the higher priced item on Amazon, so you link to that one first as an affiliate or whatever, because you're going to make a little more money from it. And sometimes it's very unconscious and subtle on the creator side as well. And yeah, Meredith is on the line, and she's asking, are we talking about affiliate marketing? Yeah, we're talking about transparency in marketing and content creation overall, and we landed on affiliates there. So
disclosures really for when we have to disclose XYZ whenever we're doing something online.
Yeah, it's not interesting. It's just ironic and cool that Meredith is on today, because she was really my first look into what it is to be an influencer. She is my cousin, and she got in with GoPro early on, kind of early in social media blowing up with video first content, and she was there and Square and had the background and graphics, so she like got in that niche really quick. So it's cool to see her in the chat, because she was very on the nose with her affiliates. I remember very early on, like she literally put it in her descriptions, which I thought was helpful. And I wonder, as we talk about like influencers and the scale of influencing, you mentioned blog, and we've talked, of course, podcast. We have words and we have text in those scenarios, but when we get to video first, that's the gap, I think, partly of what you mentioned, Gordon, with YouTube, but that's true of social media too, and I think it's I don't just think it's beneficial. I thought it was beneficial probably for people to disclose things, because I think we're in an era where transparency there's an appetite for it. It's not that it's required to sell things, right? It's not required, because we can still use all the psychological gadgets to get people to buy stuff. Like, that's still there. You can still totally, work that model. But I think that we're entering, or hopefully beginning, because of the last few years being so like kind of mind numbing with information, and being locked away and reflecting on what's important to us and saying things like the word value and authenticity, like those are lingo that we use now. I hope that there starts to be an appetite for it from consumers, which will then, of course, put the money where it needs to be. And then maybe we as affiliates, or we as representatives, or we as influencers, we as users of their stuff feel less ashamed to just say, I have a relationship with X, Y, or Z company, and be just right there about it. Because in my head, it's perplexing to me that you would trust a company to take care of you and send you stuff and send you money, but then also not be willing to just say it. But that's an ethical thing, I guess, too. And I wonder.
Well, I think that some people feel that some reviewers and bloggers and creators sort of feel like that if I'm acting like a journalist, then I should appear to be impartial. And if I tell people I've got this relationship, then I'm no longer going to appear to be impartial. And so they're walking that sort of tightrope and trying to find their way. And an influencer is someone who has the power to affect people's purchasing decisions or opinions. And if you're going to have that kind of power, you need to wield it responsibly. And journalists, historically, someone who writes for a newspaper, well, the ads are pretty obviously ads sitting next to that article in the newspaper. But even in the print world, the rules were, if you had an ad that looked like an editorial or that looked like a news item, you actually had to put a disclosure on it. And that's a long-standing rule. It's gone back probably 100 years. Well, 50 years anyway, since the FTC has been around less than 100 years. But so, this disclosure thing is not new, but the nature of the media we're using now is different enough that it's hard sometimes to tell, especially when you and I are just talking and then I mention, hey, look at this great pen that I use. You should try the Parker Jotter pen. I'm not paid by Parker or anyone else who sells pens, but maybe I should be, I
To
love
your
these
point, right now, though, Gordon, so let's say I do see the complexity of the issues, and I can absolutely see clear lines within, let's say, some of the podcasts that I've done, or if I'm talking very specifically. I was actually just working on a little post that I wanted to put on social about my love of my Shure MV88 Plus, which we will talk about at some point. But so in that respect, I made sure that I'm like, I got this microphone from Shure, right? Just to make sure that they knew that, even though my love of it is just very authentic, and I just want to talk about this microphone all the time. Okay, that said, right now we are doing the show. I'm here and I'm recording, and I have this mic. This is a lovely Heil PR 20.
That's a 30.
Or 30. No, it's a 30. That's right. Heil PR 30. And I have a 20, and I've anyway. So and this was given to me by Heil. So what about what's that? Like, do I have to now every time I go on one of these things be like, Heil, this is my Heil microphone given to me by Heil, mics. It's like,
well, if you're not talking about the mic on a particular episode of a show, where you're doing video, people aren't going to see or know that you're using, she's got a microphone. And yeah, maybe they're influenced just by the fact that Elsie uses the Heil PR 30. But if you start talking about it like you just did, and by, yes, you made the disclosure. Yep. They sent me this mic.
Yeah.
But I'd use it anyway. That
right,
kind of messaging is really powerful for the brand. And I don't think it takes away. In fact, I think it reflects well on them that they're reaching out to the right people to promote their products.
And I think that, to that point, though, I think that that's something that we need to get better at. And it feels weird and awkward. And because a lot of the time we might be talking about something, and I think in our own heads, like, let's say somebody asked me in the chat, oh, I love your mic. What is it? Oh, it's a Heil PR 30. Mm-hmm. And then in that moment, I would go, should I disclose? Should I not disclose? Is that going to take me out of it? Like, there's like all of this self-talk in our own head. And then the moment, and let's say then Trevor takes it to you, and you, Gordon, start talking, and I never disclosed it. The moment is over. And I think we as creators need to be very clear as to really quickly to say something like that and say like, oh, it's my Heil PR 30, and we sent to you by Heil. They're a great company. Something really quickly. Really love this mic, and be done with it and move forward. But I think a lot of the time we as creators also have to practice and be very clear as to what we do and how we communicate with our people, right? In a natural way.
Training ourselves to be aware and make it a habit to just be transparent about these things. And, the government does sometimes come and crack down on folks who don't do the right disclosures. I mean, I actually asked ChatGPT the other night to give me some examples of situations, and then of course I fact checked them. Be careful, but there have been fines against Kim Kardashian and Warner Brothers got hit. DJ Khaled and Floyd Mayweather on their social channels were promoting a cryptocurrency thing, and they got hit with $20 million fine, something like that. In the podcasting space, there have been situations. Wondery got hit with $1.7 million over weight loss supplement that they talked about. One of their shows was talking about without proper disclosure.
Disclosure
has been
very
hit.
Interesting.
Yeah. Joe Rogan got targeted by criticism, at least. I don't know if he ever got hit with fines, where he was featuring ads for BetterHelp, the mental health app.
Right.
And it was sort of buried in the content without a proper disclosure. So this does affect those of us that are content creators. It hasn't affected most of us because we're not at Joe Rogan and Wondery levels of things, but I think that's coming. And the rumor mill says that the FTC is revising its guidelines. And I think in a draft, they actually mentioned podcasts as some of the examples.
And that's good to know. I'm really curious about what Avis in the chat says. She asked, but why do you have to say it was sent to you just because someone asked you what mic you used? That was not their question.
So their question is, what mic did you use? And implicitly, do you like it? Is it good?
Right.
I want to use a mic like that. And if you got it for free and you are endorsing it, Avis, then, just by mentioning it and telling them, hey, this is what I use, that's sort of an endorsement. And Elsie's example, it's a good one because it is a gray area of whether that's really an endorsement. But just being transparent about, hey, I got it for free, I didn't buy this one, is valuable information that user might want to know. Hey, is she using that microphone because it's the best microphone, or because it's the best one she got for free, right?
Well, time out, because that's true. And also, I think most consumers want that. If you ask the average consumer what they want the best deal. They want the cheapest item that's the best quality. And so I think it comes back to just be proud that you have enough sway in your world, that you've built a brand for yourself, that you can do that. There's a study, which of course, I'm pulling up my Spotify now because I left my phone somewhere. And they were saying that in a study, a real academic study, when they studied disclosured ads versus not disclosured ads, and then they did a breakdown of how people felt towards the show. And I don't remember if it was podcast or not, what media form, but it was media. And it was digested without ads, with ads. Of course, everybody likes without ads better. And then with the disclosure piece of it, there was more positive feelings towards the brand in all scenarios of disclosure versus not. And not only that, but there was more positive feelings towards the brand as they disclosed more. There wasn't a point of diminishing returns in the research. And I was so glad that I pulled that up, because I'm going to try to find it in our next little go around, because that point to me was incredible, and it was delivered via podcast. But I thought that was really neat, because that is a question that we have, is when is too far? And what this particular study said was, you can't go too far, because that's what people are looking for, is that.
Well, I think to answer Buffy's question on the screen about how transparent do you have to be, I think it's hard to go too far, but I think it is possible. I think if you get into the weeds of saying, hey, on March 27th, I had a conversation with someone over there, and we agreed that they would pay me 1.5%. If you get into the details too much, then you bore your audience, and you lose, and you're no longer an influencer. So it is. We do have to find the right balance, but I think that the how much is less important than the fact that I'm receiving something of value, because that makes it a commercial relationship. And organically, if you're doing book reviews, do you have to disclose that you read it on Kindle versus a hard copy that you paid twice as much for? Probably not. But the fact that, hey, if you buy it through my Amazon link, I'm going to get a little piece of it. That's an important disclosure.
I think it's always been, I don't mind those disclosures at all, especially, when it comes to books, or I got access to this course, and I was able to check it out, and hey, I found it very helpful, blah, blah, blah. All of those things I think are incredible. The disclosure doesn't take away from the experience of the expert behind it. In fact, it can be very helpful to at least my community that I've seen, that I can say, hey, I got these things, I got access to this, these are my thoughts. I tend to lean towards the helpful feedback and the positive feedback. At this point, I have not found the benefit of going hard to something that I do not like. Meaning, I have also had hardware sent to me where I didn't like it, and I just never talk about it. And what I try to do when that happens, when I do receive that, I tend to try to communicate that with whoever sent it to me, that I say that I'll just say I may or may not talk about it. Most of the time, those relationships don't even ask. Like, they just send it. Nobody asks me to do anything. Like, most of the time, I'm not asked to do anything at all. Just here's the thing. And so then when I get it, I twinkle and mess around, right? But I tend to only talk about whatever it is if I feel it is beneficial to my community, so that they can make the best choices possible for themselves in investing their money. Because it's the work, because I know for podcasters, most of us do not have the money to be spending so much money on hardware and then buy something that we think is going to solve all our problems, and it doesn't, particularly when people are starting off, right? So if you only have $100, I am very, very careful and make sure, please try this, this, and this. And then if that works for you, you can consider up-leveling later, but that's going to take care of the majority of your work, right? I'm not going to lead somebody to buy an expensive piece of gear just because it's top of the line, because most of us probably won't even know how to use it to get the most out of it, right?
So you're actually, there's a distinction to be made between straight up advertising and endorsements.
Yes, correct.
And so you're talking about endorsements, and in fact, the legal rules are you can't or shouldn't endorse a product you don't use. And truth in advertising, if you are endorsing a product because you like it, great. But if you don't like it and you endorse it anyway, now you're engaged in false and misleading advertising.
This is true.
So, it's one thing to just say, like, as an affiliate, and this sort of gets into that question from I can't tell who sent it, from, have you ever sent a bad review as an affiliate? Well, you can say, hey, everybody's talking about this XYZ widget, and here's a link to it on Amazon. I checked it out. I'm not so impressed. I've actually done that a couple of times, but I've never just, completely, this is a terrible thing. It's horrible. It's badly built. It's cheap. It's much overpriced, but here's how you can get a copy.
That would be hilarious. And I think that people would reshare you doing that, Gordon. I think you should strongly consider
negative affiliate review.
Don't share the affiliate link. Just do the review without the suggestion to go buy it. I think that would change the nature of it. You could do a review and then also not recommend people buy it. And then it's
I guess
you give them the press.
They do it with the affiliate link. I mean, what's stopping you from saying?
There's nothing. I know that there's people that have done that for sure, because you still can get paid for that. Right. And there's also, there's another kind of, and I'm not sure, Gordon, what you think about where this lies, because I'm a huge pen fanatic, and I watch all kinds of pen and stationery content on YouTube. And what the pen industry, or at least or those folks over there, the community, not the industry, the community of stationery fanatics on YouTube, what's really lovely about them is that they get a lot, the influencers get a lot of access to expensive pens or expensive stationery, all kinds of stuff, and they get it, and they'll do like an unboxing, and then they will just show you the product and say, like, I got this from insert whatever company, and look at this. And then they open it and they show it and they write with it and they look at it and they put it in front of the camera. And it's not and they just give thoughts like, oh my gosh, I love the way this looks. Look at how pretty it is when you're writing. But it's not I don't know what kind of, I don't think that's an endorsement. They just literally got this.
Well,
right.
I mean, it's again, their disclosure is if they bought it with their own money, they can and should say so. And if they got it for free, also should say so. And it's, hey, look at this pen. It's not look at this pen. It's the best in the world.
Right.
Look at this pen.
Look what I got.
Yeah. Look what I got. Exactly. And I think there's a lot. I like that because it shares content. It allows, because to me, when it comes to investing on an expensive pen, you want to know a lot about it, right? It's not you're not going to be forking over hundreds of dollars for something that you haven't touched or seen, and then you want to see the up close nib. You want to see the enclosed mechanism. Open that thing up. You know what I mean?
Here's a scenario for you. Yeah. So suppose you're doing that unboxing video and you open the thing up and you take it out and you twist it and it breaks in your hand. Now you've got to decide, do I run this thing at all?
Right.
Or do
I tape it back together?
Well,
tape it back together, make a whole thing. I think that is maybe what.
But if you have a relationship with the brand, Trevor,
sure,
they may not like it that you show the broken thing on screen and so on, and then maybe they stop sending you more stuff, or maybe they stop sponsoring your thing, or whatever.
Maybe that's a good
now
thing,
you've got a
'cause
decision to
their
make
pen was
about how
trash.
to endorse this brand.
Right. And also the pen might not be trash though. And also here's the thing too though. I think we do have a responsibility for and I this is now you're like opened a can of worms, Trevor. Here, listen, there are established and I'm only using pens because it's exactly the same thing in podcasting. Same thing in podcasting. Okay.
Yeah, it's transferable. Yeah.
Let's say there is a pen that was sent to you from a small, not very well funded pen maker.
Yeah.
And they sent it to you because you are an influencer, and then you got it and it broke while you were filming. It is my responsibility as somebody that wants to support, especially when folks don't get that much like play, to just be like, dude, it kind of broke. What's going on with that? But I'm not going to put it out there because I want this person to succeed, right? And mind you, and if I have a relationship with them and my whole thing is to be able to help them succeed, I would probably not do that. Now, if it's somebody who's already claiming this is the best, whatever, because in Kickstarter, you see things like that all the time. This is going to fundamentally switch, blah, 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 and you get access and you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Then I think it does behoove us to be like, those claims are not right.
Yeah. And in that scenario of the broken pen, and just because we had the example, I think it's also an option. There's an opportunity if you have a relationship with the brand for you to reach out to them and ask them to, what's going on, let them correct it, let them, again, now you're sort of crossing over into journalism or consumer affairs reporting of some sort, and you can give them a chance and then say, you know what, the first one I got broke on arrival, and here's a little clip of that, but they sent me another one, and here's what I got, and boy, and then you can talk about their customer service. So there's always a way to do that, assuming that there is good customer service. If it's lousy, then why do you want to be in business with that brand in the first place?
Absolutely. And you can continue to move, because brands begin one way and maybe there's something that was a little off. It doesn't mean they will forever be that. It's it's a learning process. And 2 years ago, that's what I hate about some of that stuff, is that sometimes some of our content goes viral. Yeah. And then that narrative stays. And so, that's the brand that had that problem on the cap. And that was what happened 5 years ago, though. That's not the problem now. And that continues to be that same conversation. I hate that. But I see a question in there that I think is going to be wonderful for us to kind of move forward with a different conversation. What is pay to play and how does it work? Go, Gordon, go.
Okay. Let me give a little history on this. So pay to play is a variant on something that was called payola in the 50s and 60s and 70s, when radio hosts were being paid by record companies to play certain records in higher rotation. And that was, of course, concealed, and the station owners weren't happy because they weren't the ones getting the money. And the government was unhappy because it was a sort of fake way of promoting records and so on. And there were congressional investigations and all those kinds of things. And the FTC got involved and so on. But when we talk about pay to play nowadays, we're really talking about the scenario where the host or the creator of a podcast, or sometimes a video also, is actually paid by the guest in order for the opportunity to appear. And it raises a bunch of ethical, moral, and legal questions. If the only reason a guest is coming on the show is invited on the show is because they're paying, then don't you as a listener or a viewer want to know this? The FTC hasn't yet waded into this very much, although there was a big article in Bloomberg about a year ago that started addressing this. And there have been a few cases of podcast hosts and show producers encountering some issues around this. I think I'm not going to call out specific people's names, but some very, very prominent podcasters out there have had things like a podcast sponsorship package, basically come on my show, sponsor my show, and I'll have you on as a guest. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't make the disclosure, if you don't tell the audience, then I think it's the same thing. The host is endorsing the guest. and by extension, the guest's product or services or whatever the guest is there to promote.
I want to ask a really
So we have the
pointed question
requirements
about this, because this is a fun one. I think it's a lot in podcasting, and I think that as I've watched the trend of podcasters who have joined in the past few years, like myself, that move oftentimes into a coaching role, whether they've been there or not, it's a different story, but they move into a coaching role, and then they find themselves able to have clients that were once listeners and now become guests, or vice versa. There are two questions. Do you see it as much as a coaching world where it's sold as a package, a coaching package? It's often disclosed, so that's, I don't think, the thing that I'm wondering about. Just, do you see it as much as I do, and is it prevalent outside of the business world? And then also, do you think it's effective? Do you think that that type of relationship is more effective than, say, an ad read if you sit down and talk to someone? Because if it's more effective, then maybe it makes sense for us to go that extra mile to do the disclosure if it's more effective. Do you have any take on the effectiveness of those interviews and pay-to-play versus an ad drop, for instance?
I mean, I think it can be pretty effective. I mean, there's a show I listen to pretty religiously, to be really honest, and it's a guy that I've worked with as my coach. And he's got various tiers and levels of coaching, and I've been through some of them and not through others. And his whole podcast is, not every episode, but very often, it's an interview with one of his clients, and hearing him, and he just says, so-and-so has been a client of mine since that's XYZ, and she's going to talk today about her successes, da 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 da. Well, that client is someone just like me. So the impression I get is, oh, if she can do it, so can I. And, if this is what she learned, I should take that lesson as well. So I think that, yes, it's an endorsement. I mean, it's sort of a question of which way is the endorsement going, because that's profit. The guest isn't paying the host for the appearance on the show. They paid them for coaching, and as a byproduct of that, maybe getting to appear on the show. But I guess it could go both ways. I'm thinking more of, I wrote a book and I want to go promote it, so I'm going to go out on this tour, and I'll give any podcaster who'll interview me $5,000.
Yeah.
That podcaster is now endorsing me and my book, maybe without even having read the book, but much less whether or not they like the book. They're taking the money.
Yeah, Bree just threw up a question about how does it impact the content. Do you see that? I mean, it's got to impact the content to some extent, because that's now your audience to some extent, right? Elsie, is like, if you're serving, like, where does that meet? Maybe of like, if you have an advertiser come to you because you serve their audience, it's really a very fine line there, right? Before it starts to impact the content versus, yeah,
it's a synergy that we have to really, I think as podcasters, it's tough sometimes whenever you are in a position of like wanting to get paid and really, really needing the money, and then having somebody come in and say like, we can give you all this money, and then you're like, okay, oh man, but I don't really like their product that much. So it also depends on how you manage that, because some ways that I have dealt with that ethically and personally, like independently, a lot of the shows that I have been a part of are always co-hosted. And so the ones that are still going. And so it wasn't really necessarily just up to me to make that decision. And I also sort of passed the ball over to the co-host. You talk about them. Okay. And so and then it's like, you talk about them, or it's sort of like a dynamic ad or an ad read where we put it in there where the ad is in between and it's less connected to an endorsement, to your point, Gordon. Well, I'm not sure where that lies, where it's not me going, this is whatever, and they are this and that and the other, and it's just like a voiceover, right? That comes over and it's like it's an ad. It's not that it was like a horrible product. So I'm not talking about something that's diametrically opposed to me as a human, but maybe just not something that that I use, or I kind of don't even like that kind of lipstick, let's say, right? And maybe it's a lipstick thing. And I'm like, I don't wear that kind of lipstick. It broke a couple times for me, but I mean, they're giving us $1,000. you can talk about the lipstick.
But I think with pay to play, the real point is that if you're listening to something that is fundamentally a program length advertisement, you have to tell the audience.
Yes.
You have to tell the audience, look, this episode is sponsored by ABC Corporation, and today's guest is John Smith, the president of ABC. Welcome to the show. That's all you have to do, really.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and some are really on the nose about it in the beginning of shows too. I've heard that where they'll, like NPR is, regardless of how you feel about their reporting, because everything's a hot topic now, but I think they're pretty good at disclosing at least some of their relationships. I'm not here to tell you it's all of them because I don't know all of them, but I do know that in the beginning of their intros, they make a point to say those types of things. And even if I don't love the company, I appreciate that they throw it out there because now I'm like immediately I have a different lens on, so I can be have my BS radar, my fuzzy radar a little bit more on.
The real trouble with this is that a lot of times the sponsor or the guest doesn't want the disclosure to happen because they feel it undermines that. I paid for that. So that's a challenge, and there are entire businesses that are built up around getting guests spots on shows, and most of them, they're PR agents, and they get paid a service for booking the guests onto shows. But some of them are saying, hey, guests, you pay us money and we will share some of that money with the show itself. And again, then there's questions about disclosing those transactions stuff. I think it's a little troublesome, and I think we have to educate the guests who don't want those disclosures about why they're so important.
Yeah, 100% agree. Disclosure, transparency, I think those continue to be our antidotes, at least somewhere to look when we look at the opposite. I think transparency to me continues in our discussions. This is week 4, I think. So week 4 in, transparency and disclosure is a part of transparency, which is why I love today's topic. Transparency is like I think I use the analogy in pre-pro, the chlorine. It's like a little drop of transparency can go a long way. And then once you taste that it can be okay for your business, which research shows us, I have it, so I can definitely share it. Research shows us transparency and disclosures do work because people want that in 2023. So by all means, regardless of what type of industry you're in, regardless of who you're representing, consider the ethics behind it, but also consider that it's good for your brand and theirs to just be proud of the damn partnership. Like, just own it, put it on your shirt. Love it. I love that we get to work together and be just honest that we do this thing together. We pre-produce it together, and I think that helps a lot. The pace of media is moving so fast. We are moving very quickly towards wrapping, and I want to take 15-30 seconds for each of you. What is a headline you hope to see related to disclosures and truth in advertising, I guess transparency in advertising? What do you hope to see related to today's topic in digital newspaper or an imprint in our brain, whatever it looks like? Elsie, we'll hop to you first. What are your thoughts on what do you want to see come out?
Oh my gosh, it would be amazing for it to say something like, social media has fundamentally changed the way we see disclosures in a good way. That's what I want the title to be, because I kind of want it to be I think Instagram has done a really great job at moving towards that kind of a thing with the way that they have, the if you're using a filter, you could see the little filter out there. You can also see the partnerships. They really kind of make it extra, I've seen as of late. Anytime that I forgot what it was that I was posting the other day. It was something like, again, I was talking about something super specific. I really love this product. I don't even know if it was a product. And they were like, are you endorsing that? Is that a sponsored post? And I'm like, no, this is just me loving on. Oh, it was for It was something like I was highlighting somebody's thing. And it was just like, make sure that is this a sponsored post? Make sure that you put it in there. I was like, no, it's not a sponsor. I'm just sharing.
Well, yeah. One thing is, we shouldn't have to disclose when we're the sponsor of our own content. Right? That would get a little nuts.
Yes, that's crazy. But anyway, all I'm saying is that I would love to have that headline, because that would mean that it would make it easy for people to disclose. It would be easy for you to understand when to disclose. So it would be like, is this like a little check, 1, 2, 3, this, and this. If you check all 3, you need to add this thing, right? And I think the other layer to this, Gordon, in terms of legalities, I know that you quoted a bunch of the problems, and people have been sued and they've been fined and all of that stuff. What we don't know, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, is whether or not that has been reinforced and they have had to actually pay up, because there's a different, there's a different thing to be. I think that Kim was sued more than one time. I'm not sure she's paid all of it. I think she did pay once with that lack of disclosure. But that's the other thing. It's like you're sued for X amount for doing whatever, but is it really enforced? And do you actually get the money, right, for that? So, but that's what I would want. I would want easy social media to really lead the way in helping all of us be disclosing our affiliates and our sponsorships in a better way. One can dream.
That was a sonic bloom. No, that hit me hard. That was a really good one. I did not expect that as a possible headline, but I love that we could maybe in the next wave hope to see our social media, I guess, influencers that run those companies, the industry lead. How about you, Gordon? What do you want to see in 5 years?
Well, real quickly, to answer the question about have they been enforced and so on, when it's the government coming at you and hitting you with a fine, the consequences for not paying can be pretty dire. So I think that they do enforce it. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on behind the scenes. There may be appeals on First Amendment free speech grounds and all that kind of stuff. But I think eventually it shakes out that the fine either stands or it doesn't, and off you go. The headline I actually expect to see is some big influencer, podcaster, YouTuber hit with major fine, or even charged with a crime. It's possible. The headline I wish or hoped to see would be the FTC, or name the regulatory agency, clarifies the rules of disclosure and endorsements for podcasters. That's the one we need to see.
That would be amazing. Oh.
And it may come. I know there's talk about updating the guidelines, but it would be nice if those guidelines were more specific by various media.
That would be amazing.
Love both of them. I don't even know if I have one because I hadn't even thought about it that much. I come up with the questions sometimes and then I totally fail to think about the best question I had. Headline in 2028. So 2028 is 5 years from now. It's just before 2030 because I thought 2030 is like almost too hard to conceive. But maybe like we banish anybody who doesn't disclose to Mars, and or I think another headline that just crosses my mind on occasion, especially in the last few hours as we led up to today, is maybe it stops mattering a little bit. Like maybe we get to a point where some of these things are a little more inherent and baked into what we do in the same way that advertisement is baked in. Is that transparency just becomes more baked in because, again, it's better for brands. So I hope that the headline continues to be 5 years from now, that it is better to be transparent with your users, with your consumers, with your potential buyers. It's good for your brand and your business and your bottom line to be transparent. That is research. So I think that if that continues to be the headline, hopefully that will drive people to at least consider it rather than being ashamed or afraid of whatever boogie people they think might be in the closet when they tell everybody how much they love their headphones that were sent to them by, like, isn't that what we all want? I'm going to think you're cooler for doing that, Elsie. I think that's awesome. You got a free mic. That's so cool, man. Like, that's so cool. So I hope that it continues to be cool to be us, and I hope the influencers, the Merediths, the Gordons, the Elsies of the world continue to lead us in the direction of doing that and obviously keep the discussion very alive. I know we have many things coming up, Elsie, including the She Podcast Live, and I think that, is it today or tomorrow that Early Bird ends? I was looking at the website. I think Early Bird.
Oh my gosh, you are probably, I don't know. I'm sure it's already on the way to stop. Yes. I don't know the exact dates of all of these things changing. Just head over to shepodcastlive.com and you can get all the information there. Plus, I mean, I understand you want to save some money, but every ticket goes towards funding something that I think we need in the industry regardless. So, $50, $100 more here and there is really just going to go towards being able to make sure that we get more women and marginalized voices in podcasting, and a conference in this way And the way that we have laid it out is really a very nurturing place for all of us to feel empowered and safe. And when I say safe, I'm just mean to just be who you are and to just like let go and do things in a new way. So it's been really life-changing for a lot of people in attendance. And I'm not saying that just because it's our conference. I have experienced it firsthand, and it's unlike anything else I've ever experienced in the space, especially in podcasting. So if you do have an opportunity to buy a ticket and attend, good for you. If you have an opportunity to just buy a ticket and not attend, please do that as well.
And I believe that their advertisements still available for the Sonic Bloom Awards. I was messaging
Correct.
with y'all's team. So the Sonic Bloom Awards related to the She Podcast also coming up. There's lots of opportunities to support that. And I was looking at all the speakers between the Sonic Bloom Awards and the She Podcast Live, and it is an incredible amount of talented influencers that y'all have coming on to, that was fun, to lead that. So I'm excited to follow more of them. I have a whole page full of She Podcast stuff because there's so many updates lately. How about you, Gordon? You have a course coming up. Is it next week?
It's a workshop at the end of the month, March 27th. I'll be doing business and legal fundamentals for podcast growth and profit. Waitlist is up today, and today's the day I'm actually going to activate the actual registration screen. So come and check it out over at event.podcastlaw.net. And next week, I will be coming at you from Las Vegas, where I'll be attending the Podcast Movement Evolutions conference. And if you're going to be attending, come find me and say hello. I'd love to chat with you, and maybe we have an adult beverage or a cup of coffee or something together and talk a little bit. The topic of my talk on Thursday, that's the 9th, is legal pitfalls for true. No, that's not the right one. I'm reading off the screen instead of telling I'm heading up a panel. It's going to be me and my colleague Merlin Jean-Louis speaking sort of a legal's eye view of what's going on in the podcast industry from a legal standpoint. And then Podfest Expo Global is a virtual event where I'll be speaking on the legal pitfalls for true crime podcasters, strategies to stay out of those crosshairs. So March is going to be a busy month.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing what you have going on. Love to stay up to date. On behalf of Bree, on behalf of Pneumospect, on behalf of everyone that was in the chat, we appreciate the both of you being here to share your time and your expertise and your experience and your thoughts and your future thoughts with us. It means so much. And big thank you to Bree for running the back end and keeping, as always, the agenda on point and keeping us at least as close to time as possible. Thank you, Bree. And for just keeping everything on the rails. We are so excited to be bringing you, oh man, it slipped my mind. Bree, what is next week's topic? I had a poof moment.
We're going to be talking about privacy.
It just slipped right out of my mind. Thank you. We'll be talking about privacy, which I'm sure is another discussion that we'll have to work very hard to keep within like time constraints, because that is a big topic. That is a hot topic. And I think it continues to play well with what the season's theme is. So thank you everybody for being here. And we'll see you next Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific. It's 11 a.m. Eastern for Fuzzy Lawgic about privacy. See you later.
Yay.